Hi everyone, it's Reina. So this video is if you have your sun in Scorpio and Aries rising. And this is a combination that I would probably characterize as a bit difficult because we have two signs that both have Mars as a ruler, um, Aries solely, and with Scorpio, the rulers are both Mars and Pluto, and both of those are very fierce influences. So to look at this combination, we're looking at somebody who incarnated to express the qualities of Scorpio, and their outer demeanor, if you will, appearance, mannerisms are of Aries. The rising sign determines the person's ruler, although you can also consider your sun sign's ruler your ruler too. So that Martian energy is front and center for sure. And that can lead to a person who sees life as a battle. And if you, as a Scorpio, happen to have any Aries friends, you may observe this if you're dealing with them, is that they can be the kind of people who are very quick to anger. They can be kind of provocative, like they're trying to goad you into some kind of a fight. And so there's kind of like that hothead energy that's associated with Aries. And it's funny too, because when I say hothead, because you will see Aries people, a lot of them have red hair. Again, the rising sign is supposed to determine a lot of the physical characteristics, but I have seen that with people who have sun in Aries, where they have red hair and it really matches their temperament. So with the rising sign, you may have red hair, and even if you are somebody with dark hair, you might have red like tones over, what do they call them? Undertones, overtones, probably overtones. Streaks in your hair, or you feel like you want to dye your hair red. I think of somebody who, like Lucille Ball. I don't know if her, maybe her rising sign was Aries. I'll have to check. But she was not a natural redhead, and she dyed her hair red, and that became her trademark. Um, and that kind of thing, that you might feel like that sense of uh, being compelled to have that red hair, or maybe you love the color red and have a lot of clothing with it. It's interesting because Scorpio rules the first chakra, if I'm not mistaken, and that is the survival chakra. And one of the colors of Scorpio is like a dark red, like a blood red. And you think of blood as like kind of life. So it's kind of the basic symbolism of life. And that's what, the first chakra is survival, and its color is red. And so the when I talk about survival, one of the aspects of survival is this defensive quality of like, hey, you looked at me the wrong way. Are you trying to threaten me? There's like that defensive quality. That Aries is ruled by Mars, and Mars is the god of war. Well, why do people have wars? They have them to defend uh, their bodies, their land, their property, all these physical things, that they connect with survival. So it's very important, if somebody has this combination, that they really pay attention to how they interact with other people, because the rising sign can indicate this, and see if there is a tendency to see other people as your adversaries, even if it's not in the present moment, thinking they could be potential adversaries. And that can lead to that attitude of the best defense is a good offense. So a person who is very combative, or and if you let's say you grew up in a bad area, a high crime area, or someplace where you have to watch your back, this could become second nature to kind of have that attitude, just in general, even if you're walking through a very peaceful part of town or whatever. I I immediately thought of in the United States, the regional differences, because I come from the Midwest, and everybody's supposed to be very grounded and, down to earth. People from the West Coast, or as we call it, the left coast, are very, like, spaced out and groovy and in their upper chakras. And then people on the East Coast are, supposed to be very much like what I'm describing here. Like, what are you looking at? And I have used this example before, that I had a friend who was from New York, and she came to move to the Chicago area, and one time we were out, and she was a nice person, but we were in a parking lot, and she said to somebody, what are you looking at, or something, like. And that's those kinds of defense mechanisms, and I really see that the rising sign is a defense mechanism. So this could certainly be a combination of somebody who grew up with trauma, because Scorpio tends to specialize in it. Scorpio rules the eighth house, which can be about trauma. And yet, Scorpio is like the phoenix rising from the ashes, the cat with nine lives. So Scorpio, I think of that album by Courtney Love called Live Through This. I think that was the name of it. And that's kind of like the Scorpio motto. Motto is to live through anything. And so it's important, if you have been through a lot in your life, that you are able to um, kind of navigate the world without a chip on your shoulder. Because Aries rising with the sun in Scorpio, I could kind of see this. And I feel that, especially until the first Saturn return, until one's late 20s, that the rising sign is very influential in the person's uh, personality makeup. And so they will tend to exhibit those qualities. So that aggression, and this, unfortunately, these days, because of women adopting the toxic masculinity, you see young women physically fighting each other, or just, like, going into a store and, like, just kind of like um, tearing it up because they have a confrontation with somebody behind the counter. And these kinds of things, when I see that, like, sometimes you see that on YouTube, oh, look, this person did this and that. I just can tell that that person is severely traumatized, that they probably went through a lot when they were growing up. And they simply do not know how to manage their anger. They don't know how to manage frustration. They don't know how to manage being insulted, like feeling insulted. Sometimes we do get insulted. Somebody might actually call you out of your name, whatever. But that doesn't mean that you have to react. And learning not to be reactive is one of the greatest signs of maturity, emotional maturity, with this combination. Because Aries is always going to get the rap of being an immature sign. I'm a Sagittarian, Leo, we're all fire signs. And sometimes fire signs get accused of being childish. And there is a difference between childish and childlike. Childlike is being spontaneous, open, not being guarded, being, trusting, creative. And we want to cultivate those qualities. But childishness is, being very self centered, where, you have to get your needs met right here, right now. You don't have any kind of patience. And it's like having a little, grand mal hissy fit, temper tantrum. When you don't get your way, this could definitely be the case, especially Aries, because Aries is the first fire sign and it's very immediate. And there's not that much of a filter. It just kind of like the person just goes off. And and also Aries is a cardinal sign, so that means that the person really wants to have what they want when they want it. They don't want to take orders, they want to give orders. So it's very difficult for Aries people sometimes to humble themselves and to obey somebody else. They can be very defiant. And you may very well have this tendency with this combination. And I think also because of the power issues associated with Scorpio, that's what can make this combination so difficult. So if you're somebody who is still in your 20s and you feel like you resemble these remarks, don't worry about it, because knowledge is power. And the more that you learn how to be patient and not be reactive, which we call being neutral about situations, because it's important to note that this is an emotional combination. The water and the fire are both emotional in their own way. And when somebody's emotional and that's their basic makeup, everything, especially with the water energy, everything that they perceive in life is taken personally. Even if they're, reading a news story, it can trigger for them a memory of something that happened similar to themselves. And that's not really empathy, because empathy is being able to put yourself in other people's shoes. But it's not necessarily that you have to identify with what happened. And so this is where it becomes a problem, because when people get triggered because it reminds because something that they're experiencing reminds them of something that happened to them before, it's really just that kind of um, you could call it self-absorption in a sense, but it's not coming from a place that is really positive. The whole idea of being sensitive is that it gives us more empathy so that we can have more compassion for others. But when people have sensitivity that is really like hypersensitivity directed towards themselves, then it's more like a sense of somebody who is, their ego is constantly being triggered, and because it makes them feel bad about themselves, then they act out. So learning how to be more objective about situations, even if they directly involve yourself, is super important. Even if a stranger yells at you on the street, or you're unfairly um, targeted by somebody, and I'm talking about like just a complete stranger, when you understand that that is about them and it has nothing to do with you, then you're going to be okay. But until then, you're going to feel like the victim. You're going to feel like you have to defend yourself. And these kinds of things tend to be self perpetuating. They go on over and over again, because the person, it's like kind of the law of attraction, where the more you invest in something, and that could be like in an idea that you have about a certain situation, the more it presents itself in front of you. What you resist persists, what you focus on increases. This can be a great combination for somebody who is involved in work that is very risky. So if you work in I was going to say law enforcement, um, if you work in something where like law enforcement or in kind of a military occupation because of the Mars connection, you have to really have those emotions under control, obviously. But anything where there's danger is something that may attract you. But I was thinking more of like criminal justice. Scorpio, people who have a prominent Scorpio tend to be very insightful as it pertains to other people's psyches. So they're very perceptive about psychological motivation. And that can be really good for working with troubled people because you understand them, and maybe people who act out themselves physically. If you have healed from that, and you know if you have some kind of um, tools in your toolbox that you can help other people how to deal with their kind of explosive anger, if they have anger management issues, this would be a great combination for that, actually. Um, Also, I was going to say boxing. I don't like boxing because I just think it's a violent sport. But, people still do it, whether I like it or not. I always associate boxing with Aries. But the thing about Scorpio is that there is that psychological angle too, which can help them to psych out their opponent. And so that's good for any sport, to be honest with you, any competitive sport. So this could be a very competitive combination because of the Mars connection. And also because Scorpio is a fixed sign, it's very good for people to develop discipline. And you may have inner planets also in Scorpio, like Mars and Scorpio, for instance, that is great for somebody training, working out, trying to build up their body, but doing it very consistently. Um, but I was almost going to say, God help you if you have the Sun and Mars in Scorpio, and then Mars and then Aries rising. That would be quite a combination. And artistic careers would also be something that you'd probably do very well in. Martial arts, that might be a really good one because it combines, to me, it's a more positive thing. Ultimately, you're really competing against yourself. You're not trying to knock out your opponent, and it's very helpful. So, a martial arts instructor. Um, and then in terms of your love life, this could be a tricky combination because Aries, Scorpio is associated with sex, but I really see Aries more of like the lust. Again, it's that Mars. Mars can be the sex drive. So people, maybe especially when you're younger, you can be somebody who goes looking for those. Um, I would even say like one night stands, things where you can just feel like it proves that you're desirable. But it's not just that. It's actually, you'd have to look at other factors for that. But I feel like even more so, it can be like the thrill of the hunt, of trying, there's a word for it. Like when you get somebody, it's like you've kind of I wish I could think of that term, but you know, like the thrill of the chase type of thing. And that can lead to kind of more superficial encounters, which your sun sign Scorpio frowns upon because Scorpio wants to dive deep. So that can be a little bit tricky navigation. As you get older, you may appreciate a stable relationship much more. And also, another thing in that regard, if you tend to be more of the hit 'em and quit 'em variety, that you realize that it's doing a lot of damage to you emotionally. And by the way, speaking of emotions, look to see what your moon sign is because that's going to really factor into what I just said. You can't just talk about the sun and rising signs exclusively without thinking about the moon, which is very important in that holy trinity between sun, moon, and rising, which I believe comprise the core personality traits. The moon is very important in that, especially if your sun is in Scorpio, because that's a water sign already. So it's already coming from that emotional point of view. And if a Scorpio person, for instance, has the moon in an air sign, so Gemini, Libra, or Aquarius, they might do some emotional bypassing, and that complicates how they interact in relationships, and that that it just creates another thing to have to deal with. So I think I'm going to leave it there. Oh, well, let me just say very briefly about physical appearance. I talked about red hair, red clothing, but also maybe the skin, maybe the person always um, tends to be overheated. Some people are very flushed. Now, obviously, people who are more melanated are going to not necessarily show that flushness, but who knows? Maybe you can. Uh, you know, um, People who blush easily. Yeah, you can see it regardless sometimes that comes over. But there's like kind of this very aggressive, pushy demeanor sometimes with these people. And it's really funny because I've learned not to take offense to it. I have Taurus rising. So one of my pet peeves is when people try to rush you, push you to get you to do things quicker. I just like that really bothers me. But I've learned not to take it personally when I encounter a person like that because I figure that they're probably Aries rising and they're just like very impatient and that and you like even if you're talking to somebody like that they will kind of like cut into they're very curt, they talk very like use very few words and they just want to get on to the next thing. So you may have certain qualities like that and you have to learn how to slow down and be more receptive and less aggressive in your environments that you navigate in life. And but it will probably always be the case where you'll have a little bit of that. And on the plus side, it can make you very energetic to the point where you may be ADHD. I should just say specifically hyperactive, meaning that it's very hard for you to just sit down and read a book. You tend to want to always do something and move around. You know what I mean? Like a Mexican jumping bean, if you remember those little things, and they would hop up and down. Uh, it's just like it's very important to relax, but it is true that some people just have oodles of energy. So one thing you can do is make sure that you get plenty of exercise, so that you're able to kind of discharge extra energy. When it comes to love, it's very important not to bring drama to relationships. Scorpio can always have trust issues, fear of abandonment, fear of betrayal. And with the Aries energy being naturally combative, maybe bossy, controlling. This combination can lend itself, if the person isn't careful, to getting involved with in relationships where there is a lot of um, disharmony, and that can, create drama-filled relationships instead of having passion, cultivating passion, which is a positive type of emotion that spurs each person on to, living life to the fullest. But the lower uh, manifestation of this is much more something negative and destructive. Okay, that's what I have for you. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.